Hello, everyone. So today we're talking about the case of Marcellus Williams. You may have heard about this case. It had its conclusion fairly recently when Marcellus Williams received the state-sanctioned murder for a crime that he did not commit. And cases like this are always heavy on my heart. I talked about this in the last video I did about Emmanuel Littlejohn. The first case that ever started this podcast was the case of Julius Jones, a man who was on death row for something he did not commit. And so cases like this I take very serious because I feel like a lot of times the crimes don't match the punishment. And in this case, you have to wonder, did he even have any involvement whatsoever? We know that with Emmanuel Littlejohn, yes, there was a crime committed, but the actual act of taking someone's life, we're not 100% sure he even did. With Julius, he wasn't even there. So this is a very just mind-boggling case that it actually did happen this way. It just made me really sad to know that this happened. I was, like many people, hoping for a different outcome for Marcellus. So today I want to tell you about his story and put his name out there because he deserves to have his story told. So like with Emmanuel's case, I'm going to tell you obviously why they arrested him, the crime he supposedly committed. But we're going to be mostly talking about why he's not guilty at all. So, in 1998, Felicia Gale, or Leisha as she went by, a former St. Louis Post-Dispatch reporter in St. Louis, died after being stabbed 43 times in her own home. 2 years later, Marcellus was convicted of first-degree murder, robbery, and burglary of Felicia. Although no physical evidence or crime scene evidence connected him to the crime and the state presented no motive, his convictions relied primarily on the inconsistent testimonies of two incentivized witnesses whose testimonies were inconsistent with the crime scene evidence, with their own prior statements, and with each other. In 2016, testings of DNA samples were retrieved from the crime scene entirely excluded Marcellus as a contributor, contradicting the testimony-based evidence used to convict him. On August 11th, 1998, Dr. Daniel Pikus came home from work around 8 p.m. to find his wife Felicia dead at the bottom of the stairs in their home. She had been stabbed 43 times, and one of their kitchen knives was protruding from her neck. The DNA sampling in 2016 was conducted on the handle of that knife that was in her neck. There was detected a presence of male DNA, but not Marcellus's. Marcellus's DNA was not that DNA. This evidence had been reviewed and analyzed by 3 DNA experts who all came to this conclusion. In 2017, the then Missouri Governor Eric Greitens stayed Marcellus's execution based on those DNA results, but no court had been willing to hear this evidence. Even though this murder occurred during the day and neighbors were out and about, no one actually saw Marcellus anywhere near Felicia's home. Police collected hairs found near the body and found bloody footprints outside the house. But Marcellus was also excluded as the source of the hairs and as the source of the footprints. Absolutely no forensic evidence ties Marcellus to the crime, and the state has offered no motive regarding why Marcellus would have even done this. There is nothing tying him to this case whatsoever. Like I said, the case against Marcellus relied heavily on the testimonies from earlier that I was telling you about. They came from a prison informant and Marcellus's ex-girlfriend. The prison informant was actually well known for his dishonesty, and he refused to participate in this case unless he received a payment. And he did. He got $5,000 from prosecutors. His information was essentially what you heard about in the newspapers, suggesting he could have been fed this information indirectly or directly. The ex-girlfriend also has a history of deception, and she was facing solicitation charges when she was initially approached about the case. And it kind of feels like police were essentially buying witnesses to put away an innocent man. And for what? Why? Why couldn't they be bothered to properly do their jobs? So, the ex-girlfriend, she had worked with police before and had testified against Marcellus in a previous trial. She had even lied under oath in her recorded deposition regarding her arrest history. At some stage, police had considered charging her as an accomplice in the crime. The ex-girlfriend said Marcellus had scratch marks on him, but there was no forensic DNA present under Felicia's nails. So these incentivized testimonies were the only pieces of evidence police had against Marcellus. Marcellus shouldn't have even been considered at this point, right? According to the National Registry of Exonerations, incentivized witness testimony has contributed to 14% of death penalty cases that later led to a DNA exoneration. So why are police buying testimonies when someone's life is on the line? Instead of trying to work for actual justice to find the people that are actually doing this, they're just buying witness testimonies, and I don't understand it. In August 2017, Governor Greitens intervened hours before the scheduled execution, signing an executive order postponing the date. Greitens assembled a board of inquiry to investigate the case and review all evidence that had been presented at trial. The board was also tasked with reviewing newly found DNA evidence and any other pertinent evidence to which the jury may not have had access. The order granted the board the authority to demand testimony and information and required to keep its proceedings and all collected information confidential. The executive order clarified that the execution would be postponed until the governor had decided whether Marcellus should be granted mercy based on the board's findings. It's unclear if any report was issued. Marcellus's legal team never received a report, and Governor Parsons dissolved the board without giving any indication he had received recommendation. So Governor Parsons eventually took the place of Governor Greitens. With all the evidence we have, or should I say, the lack thereof, it calls into question the validity of his conviction. And I think you can kind of see that now. They have absolutely nothing. The state destroyed or corrupted any evidence that could have easily proved his innocence. And Marcellus's attorneys followed a flurry of appeal efforts based on what they described as new evidence, including alleged bias in jury selection and contamination of the murder weapon prior to trial. The victim's family had also asked that Marcellus be spared death. However, the Supreme Court would deny a stay of execution, which came a day after the Missouri Supreme Court and Governor Parsons both refused a stay. The High Court offered no explanation for its decision, but Justices Sonia Sotomayor, Elena Kagan, and Ketanji Brown Jackson both noted dissents in which they said that they would have granted the request to pause the execution. And I have a quote from one of Marcellus's attorneys, Larry Comp, who says, "While he would readily admit to the wrongs he had done throughout his life, he never wavered in asserting his innocence of the crime for which he was put to death tonight. Although we are devastated and in disbelief over what the state has done to an innocent man, we are comforted that he left this world in peace." End quote. And another quote from another one of his attorneys, Tricia Rojo Bushnell. She says, "They will do it even though the prosecutor doesn't want him to be executed. The jurors whose who sentenced him to death don't want him to be executed, and the victims themselves don't want him to be executed. We have a system that values finality over fairness, and this is the result that we will get from that." End quote. And then a quote from the NAACP, who says, "Missouri lynched another innocent black man. Governor Parsons had the responsibility to save this innocent life, and he didn't. We will hold Governor Parsons accountable. When DNA evidence proves innocence, capital punishment is not justice, it is murder." End quote. And that is correct. There is not a single piece of evidence that said Marcellus did this in any way whatsoever. All of the important things, DNA, no DNA on the scene. The footprint did not belong to him. The hairs did not belong to him. No one saw him there that day. There is no evidence whatsoever linking him to this case. And still, Marcellus Williams was murdered by the state of Missouri because of fuck-ass Governor Parsons. And I'm also in disbelief that they could just do this, because I don't know how they could not see that he's a very innocent person. 55-year-old Marcellus died by lethal injection on Tuesday, September 24th, 2024. His last statement, witnessed on September 21st, was, "All praise be to Allah in every situation." Marcellus was a devout Muslim. His last meal consisted of chicken wings and tater tots. He had a final visit with his imam, Jalahi Qasim, before. Around 4:50 p.m., the Department of Corrections received word that all petitions had been denied, and an hour later the witnesses, Marcellus' son, and 2 attorneys were moved into the viewing area of the prison. At 6:01 p.m., the ejection was administered, and he was pronounced dead at 6:10 p.m. Around 100 demonstrators were present at the prison grounds protesting capital punishment and his execution. None of Felicia's family was present. And that is the story of Marcellus Williams' state-sanctioned murder for something he did not do. So, the prosecutors did not want him to be executed. The former jurors did not want him to be executed. Felicia's own family did not want him to be executed. They weren't even present at his execution. You have protesters. You have a governor, Governor Greitens, who stayed his execution multiple times, trying to figure out what the hell was even going on with this case, because he cared enough to try to spare this person's life. And then you have Governor Parsons, who comes in, who doesn't give one flying fuck about justice, clearly, and goes ahead and lets an innocent man be murdered. Governor Parsons, you have blood on your hands. You murdered an innocent person. You are okay with that. And that should disgust everybody. It's disgusting. And it's not just Governor Parsons. The Supreme Court of the United States, they were okay with it. The Missouri Supreme Court was okay with it. It's not just Governor Parsons, it's the whole system. The whole system is just fucked. I don't know how you can look at a case where there's a bloody footprint. There is a knife out of the victim's neck. There are hairs. And you test these things, and none of them belong to the one person you have locked up for this crime. That right there should tell you we have the wrong fucking person. Let this person out. And they put an innocent man to death, and in doing so, Felicia Gale will never actually get justice. They killed a person they thought was responsible, which means this case probably will never be looked at again. They will probably never actually try to properly solve this case. Which means that whoever did this to her is 100% still out there, got away with it, and the state of Missouri does not care. Because for them to want to try to actually solve this case the right way, they would have to admit that they murdered an innocent person. And the state isn't going to do that. So, Felicia Gale and her family did not receive justice. They probably never will. And now Marcellus Williams is murdered for something he did not do, and he's never going to get justice. Because the state will never admit they're wrong. Governor Parsons will not admit they're wrong. The Supreme Courts will never admit they're wrong. And that is where we're at. And something needs to be done, because if we don't start sounding the alarm more, if we don't start getting louder about what people are doing to innocent people, it's just going to keep getting worse and worse. And what if it's you that's next? What if it's anyone that's next who is an innocent person whose life is being taken over what, honestly? What if it's someone you know that's next? And that is why people need to be loud about this and say, we know what you're doing. We're not going to let you get away with it. Well, this was the case of Marcellus Williams. Thank you so much for listening to his story. It broke my heart when I heard about it. I hate these kinds of cases, and there's so much more of them than we even know. I talked about in past videos how Oklahoma, which is where I'm from, we have a track record with wrongful convictions, especially ones that end up on death row, because we had a really shitty DA years ago. And that's the case everywhere. Thank you so much, though, for listening to his case. My heart also goes out to Felicia Gale's family. They also lost someone, and in this whole ordeal, they never really received justice because the wrong person was convicted of this crime. So my heart goes out to y'all. I hope something can happen in the future where she can properly get justice. And my heart goes out to the family of Marcellus Williams, because y'all also lost someone, and nobody won. Nobody won in this case. Except, I guess, except for the state of Missouri. But thank you so much for listening, and I will see you guys very soon. Bye, guys.